Thank you. Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Toomey, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. Climate change is a very important challenge, but climate change poses no measurable risk to the financial system. Risk means unforeseen events. We know exactly where the climate is going over the horizon that financial regulation can contemplate. Weather is risky, but even the biggest floods, hurricanes, and heat waves have essentially no impact on our financial system, and they are well modeled. Moreover, the financial system is only at risk when financial institutions as a whole lose so much and so suddenly that they blow through their capital and a run on short-term debt erupts. That climate may cause a sudden, unexpected, and enormous economic effect, which could endanger the financial system, is a fantasy. Now, sure, we don't know what will happen in 100 years, but banks did not fail in 2008 because they bet on radios, not TV, in the 1920s. Financial regulation does not try to look past 5 or 10 years or so. Sure, a switch to renewables might lower oil company profits. Oil stockholders might lose money. But risk to the financial system cannot mean that nobody ever loses any money. Tesla couldn't have been built if people couldn't take risks. So why is there a push for regulators to take on fictitious climate risks? These proposals aim simply to defund the fossil fuel industry before alternatives are available and to steer funds to fashionable but unprofitable investments by regulatory subterfuge rather than above-board legislation or transparent agency rulemaking. This goal isn't a secret. For example, the NGFS, which the Federal Reserve recently joined, states plainly its goal is to, quote, mobilize mainstream finance to support the transition toward a sustainable economy, unquote. But financial regulators aren't allowed to mobilize the financial system to projects they choose and to defund projects they disfavor. So regulators must pretend that they're dispassionately finding risks to the financial system and, oh, we just happened to stumble on climate here. There are plenty of genuine severe risks to the financial system. Imagine a new pandemic, one that kills 10% of people and lasts for years without a vaccine. Suppose China invades Taiwan or a nuclear bomb goes off. Suppose there's a sovereign debt crisis. What happens if Treasury can't roll over its big debts and banks no longer take Treasury collateral? Suppose a massive cyber attack wipes out the accounts at a major bank and everybody rushes for cash everywhere. These would be genuine financial system catastrophes. Yet of all these large, obvious, and plausible risks, our financial regulators want to focus on just one, a fictitious climate risk. Why? Well, obviously, the end justifies the means. Climate is really important. Climate is too important to let financial regulators play with it. Climate needs clear-headed, science-based, steady, transparent policy with explicit cost-benefit analysis. Underhandedly funding and defunding financial regulators' enthusiasms will produce counterproductive, feel-good policies. True climate answers might include nuclear power, geoengineering, carbon capture, hydrogen fuel cells, genetically engineered foods, zoning reform, a carbon tax, as Dr. Cochran suggested, and other approaches which financial regulators will never envision. If we had done this 10 years ago, we wouldn't have hydraulic fracking and natural gas, which means the US is leading the world in carbon reductions, and without which Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia would be rolling in the money, and America would be in much worse economic shape. Financial regulation is too important to be eviscerated on the altar of defunding fossil fuels. Financial regulation needs to get back to making sure that financial institutions have capital to withstand all sorts of shocks, which nobody can foresee. It's hard work and it's boring work. You don't get invited to Davos. Industry hates being told to get more capital, but that's their job and there's plenty to do. The financial system is in peril. Last year was an abject failure, despite 12 years of intensive regulation and stress tests and centuries of experience. Financial regulators never thought a pandemic might come. We made it through last year by one more massive bailout, not regulatory prescience. And now they want to soothsay the climate. Don't let the EPA regulate banks. don't let our financial regulators dream up climate policy. You'll get bad climate policy and a more fragile and sclerotic financial system if you do.